Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I should have practiced this beforehand, but it's Pogue, right?
Yes, it is. Good
Oh,
job.
great,
Right,
great.
perfect,
So
perfect.
today I have Lindsey Pogue, author, with me. And dystopian, definitely dystopian genre. Any other genres you're in? You're crossover?
Yeah, I kind of hug a few different lines. I started off writing post-apocalyptic survival stuff, and with kind of a flair of I would say a little more sci-fi in that it's not just like surviving at the end of the world. Because when it was a series that I had written with someone else, and it started with some genetic mutation. So there's a little bit of like The Stand, Stephen King's The Stand meets Firestarter with some fire abilities and stuff.
Oh, very
But
cool.
yeah, I started out writing post-apocalyptic, and I my passion is writing things with history. So I tend to find myself writing a lot more dystopian lately because I can take parts of society and kind of twist them, and so that's kind of where I've been doing a lot of like historical fantasy and dystopian stuff lately. So
Oh, interesting. I'm
yeah.
interested to hear. So, post-apocalyptic, what was their world like? And well, first tell us what that series is, the name of it, so we can make sure and find it, and then a little
Yeah.
more about that.
So for the post-apocalyptic stuff, at least what I initially started writing, it was in what I call the ending world. It was a series that my flagship series that I wrote with another Lindsay. It's very confusing. We called ourselves Team Lindsay. It was just easier. But anyways, we wrote the ending series, and it was a post-apocalyptic story about these two women who they're in their 20s, both in college on the opposite sides of the United States. And it's funny because it actually started out as a blog project that we were doing. It was never going to be a book. Like we never sat down and were like, well, let's be authors and write a book together. It was really just us having fun. We both worked at a bookstore, and so we're just surrounded by stories and book covers, and you kind of get high on that sometimes. So it's like we're like, oh, let's do a fun writing project too. And so, like I said, we sat down and we came up with this whole post-apocalyptic, like if a virus spread and it was genetically altered, like what could it do to people? And it was these two women who were on the opposite sides of the United States, and they were trying to stay in communication. And then we realized, it kind of sucks because if the world ends, like you're not going to really have, ways of communicating for very long. And so then we were like, oh, well, we want it to be more of a story than just, emails and text messages that will be obsolete at some point. So anyways, then we started turning into an actual story in a book. So it turned into an actual series, and that was about 10 years ago. And so from there I wrote a lot more in that world. So the Savage North Chronicles is what I'm mostly known for, and that's like a series within that world. It takes place in Alaska and Canada, and it's essentially these people who they're all survivors. They survived the fever, but they kind of woke up into this crazy world where not like people are going crazy or everyone's dead. Like they're survivors in general are scarce, and half of them are, not safe to be around. So anyways, we just kind of have this band of survivors. We have some kids and some adults, and they are all strangers, and they all have to figure out how to survive and rely on each other in the middle of the Arctic. So it was really challenging to write that, but that's probably it's my longest series so far, and it's my most popular, I think, because each book follows a different character in that, of those survivors. And so I think readers get pretty attached to them. But anyways, the first book in that is free. So I guess if anybody's interested, it's called The Darkest Winter. And it's probably the grittiest, most action-packed one. And then from then on, they kind of go into like settling into the new world and all the other things they never thought they had to think about in surviving after like the initial, collapsing society and stuff like that. So, and surviving the winter. I really like to pit my characters against something other than just people. I absolutely love writing about the like ravaging weather situations and stuff. So you'll find that a lot in a lot of the adventures that I write. So yeah, and then from there I wrote the Forgotten Land series, which is also post-apocalyptic, or at least it was supposed to be. It was more alternative history. And so, but as I write more in that world, I'm on book 6 in that world. It's turning more and more into more of just like a historical kind of fantasy twist. So, because there's a lot of different cultures that are involved. So then you start getting back into like alternative history can go so many different ways, you know, like I'm writing Vikings and pirates right now. And before that, it was like more Western, with like, yeah, like bands of and clans of people like kind of fighting or, you know, trying to survive in the desert where if there's sandstorms, they have to have like special masks and stuff. So it's cool. So every story that I go to, again, like I said, it's all different types of survival. I think it's just like the genre itself kind of changes as far as like what niche does it go into. Is it more dystopian, or is it more historical fantasy, or is it more contemporary and there's a virus and you have to survive? But
Yeah.
I definitely throw in as many curveballs as I can that aren't necessarily human inflicted. So
Well, that
anyways.
definitely does give your characters a challenge. But
Mhm.
do you do a lot of research to figure out how to get them out of these challenges and what it would be like to be in them?
Yeah, you know, I hear all these authors are like, oh, I could write a book in, you know, however many months or whatever. And I could write a rough draft in that. But I feel like I'm always slogging through the first draft because I do so much research. And it's kind of a tricky line, right? Because I don't want to write a historical fiction in that. I don't want somebody to be like, oh, well, all of like this isn't exactly how it happened. That's why I'm trying to be really careful, because I want to write things that I can take liberties with. So that's why I try not to ever market it as like historical fiction or anything like that. But yeah, I do a lot of research. And you know what the crazy thing is when you're researching history and you're trying to tie it in, at least for me, I have found that um fact is so much crazier than fiction. So you can find so many things to build and include in a world or change it however you want, you know, like I just wrote The City of Ruin. City of Ruin is like a gothic dystopian Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's like Jane Eyre meets Beauty and the Beast. And I did so much research on industrial like Victorian England to write that because that's kind of the setting that I was going for. And I mean, there were just so many crazy, horrible things that happened in the city of London during that time to people and all these. So it was like, and all these really cool things that were being invented too, or they started to do underground, you know, they started to do underground transportation, and the cities were booming with things like booming with so many people. And there was so much going on that there was so much sick people that they had to have special death trains to like take dead bodies. I mean, there's just so much stuff that like is real life that I could like put into these crazy stories, and they're like, oh my god, that's so cool. And like it actually happened. That's the crazy part.
Wow.
So that's why I think I kind of have this like a crazy giddy addiction to history, because I just think it's so fascinating. So
That is very fascinating. I haven't studied that time period very much.
yeah.
I studied that time period a little bit, but only in relation to like dating rituals. So I didn't get much past that for one of my books. But,
Yeah, but I mean, it's just fun. And I think, you know, you also have to have like that was what my major was. I got my master's in history and culture. So for me, I clearly have I have it in my blood to be interested in those things. I know that's not what it's like for other people, but I think for me, I mean, it takes me a while to get a story out because I try and figure out what would people really eat if they had to survive in this world. Like, what are the actual berries that grow there or whatever, you know what I mean? How would I tell that, you know, what's poisonous versus what isn't? Or now, if I've retained any of the information is a completely different question, because I did so much research for The Darkest Winter to figure out how to survive in the Arctic with like nothing. And could I ever do it on my own? Absolutely not. But I feel like I was in it for months trying to like get it all down and make sure that it's mostly logical, you know? So I just.
well, if you go in one of those reality series and you can only take 5 things, make sure to take your own book, right?
That's actually a really good point. That's actually really funny. That could help for sure. So but anyway, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm kind of all over the place with everything, but I just have to go, I guess, where my brain takes me, which you can probably relate because it's not like you can just shut things off.
No, yeah, I definitely, for my historical fiction, fantasies, dystopian books, I do a lot of that research, and I can get really far into that rabbit hole of research. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
come back. It doesn't have to be that exact or that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's also hard because I don't know if you've come across this or not, but the closer that you make it to real life too, the easier it is to offend people. So it's really hard to like, and I'm not saying that's being insensitive. It's like kind of just what it is, you know? So it's like the closer, and I've learned that in my writing. So I really try and not do exact when it comes to cultures and that sort of thing. I've really had to learn to make it my own, like maybe get ideas or whatever, but really make it my own because I don't want to take too many liberties and then, you know, be offensive in any way. So that's a whole other, that's a whole other like line to toddle there, but
Very cool.
yeah.
And so it sounds like you've been writing for about 10 years since your first series with
Yeah,
Team Lindsey.
I know. Yeah. We actually are still writing together too, off and on. So in the same world, it's like just natural now. But yeah, we both went our own way, but we've been writing ever since. So yeah, about 10 years. I think it's gonna be 10 years in November. So
That's
that's
exciting.
crazy.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. How long have you been writing?
I have been I've been published since 2015, so
Okay.
7 years. It took me like 8 years to get my first manuscript to do anything with it. And, you know, I was pushed by several people several times, and then I was finally like, okay, maybe I'll try something.
No, that's great.
Yeah. But how did it work to write with someone else? I've never done that before. Did you write like different chapters, or did you edit each other's work, or how did that work?
So it's funny that you asked that because as we're working on a new project right now, we sit down to figure it out, like the logistics. I'm like, wait, how do we do this every time? Why is this so confusing? Okay, so what we do generally is we do have two different POVs. So um, essentially what happens is we will outline everything by chapter. In this case, you kind of have to, right? When you work with somebody, even if you're like, I always outline, but sometimes it's more loose than other times. Like when we do it together, like we need it to be really honed in because it's just, that's what we have to both work off of. So we'll go ahead and we will get the outline fixed and all of that ready to go. And then we kind of just dive in. So if I have the first chapter, then I start, and essentially, if none of our chapters, let's say the first 7 chapters, have nothing to do with each other, then we'll just write them. But as soon as our chapters start kind of meshing together in any way, we always we wait for, like, if I'm writing a chapter, then she's next, she'll read mine and then write, and then I'll read hers and write my next one, that sort of thing. So it kind of changes based on what our needs are, but in general, that's pretty much how it goes. And then yeah, right now we're in the revision, or we're doing our big read through, because like we've read through our own chapters. Now we're starting to do our read through for this new book. We're starting to do our read through, and we were trying to figure out like, so we put all of our, even though we've read them separately, because we use like Google Docs or whatever, and so we can go in and read each other's stuff, but now we have it all together, so now it's all more concise. So now we're going to start at the beginning and read through it, but then we're like, okay, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to leave all the comments or changes or whatever throughout, and then she's going to go through and do all the same thing at the same time. So it gets a little tricky sometimes, because then when we're done, we have to like figure out how to clean that mess up. Yeah. But then that's when we send it to betas and we let them tell us how much we screwed it up in the process, and hopefully it'll go from there. But overall, I think it's really fun writing with someone. I don't do it obviously all the time, but it's really nice to kind of get out of your own head, you know. I don't know if you have ever considered writing with somebody, but I think there's something in it where it's like it kind of puts a spark of fun back into it, because you can brainstorm and you can have your successes together and celebrate together and all that. You know, it's not just like you in your own head. If you have a plot hole, you have to figure it out yourself, you know. Like you can, with somebody else, you can kind of like bounce ideas off. And so that's kind of a nice refreshing aspect to it for sure. There are definitely issues that could go into it. You know, working together, we've really, especially over the last 10 years, we've had to really kind of figure out like how we work best together and like manage expectations and stuff like that. But in general, yeah, it's if you have a writing partner that you trust and somebody that you work well with, then it could be a really fun thing. So
that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, I just released an illustrated novel, which is the first time I had done that. And I wanted the illustrator to have some say in the storyline. And so we worked together a little bit, and that was really fun. But it's also really nervous for me to put my stuff out there and wait. And I do that with beta readers, but it was kind of different this time when I felt like I was being judged a little bit more. But it was good because there was one part that I had in there, but I didn't love, but I didn't know how to fix it. And they were able to help me fix it. So at least you have that, a little bit of a person who understands the story and gets the story and had some skin in the game on the story that can help you like work through that.
That's really cool. So an illustrated novel, or is there, so how are you, is there, how does that work? Is it kind of like a graphic novel?
It's not a graphic novel. We have, I could show it to you. It's like way over there. So he did 10 illustrations. So they're not like,
got it. Okay.
So it's about 45,000 words, and he did 10 illustrations. So it's really at the major story points that he does the illustrations, and he made a couple of maps. And then
that's so cool though.
He started with like hand-drawn sketches to create these illustrations. So in the back we put like the original hand-drawn sketches and how, so you could kind of see the progress of how the illustrations went. So it was a lot of fun. And I think, for people who are interested in writing or in art, right, are maybe like interested in seeing how that process came about. So
yeah, that's really neat. That's a really fun idea.
Thanks. Yeah, it wasn't my idea. I can claim it because I met him online in like a group meetup, and I was attracted to his art, and he was attracted to my stories, and we started talking, and we were trying to figure out how to do something together. And I was thinking, a bookmark or a coloring sheet. I was thinking little project, right? And he's like, we could write a book together. And I was like, okay.
Like, what kind of book is it?
Yeah, I'll get it and show it to you. That was weird, but okay. So it's called Azrea, Aztec.
Oh, wow.
So it's a mythology book, and she's not a mythological creature, but she's supposedly marked by the gods. And she's supposedly, everyone, her family thinks she's cursed. So they send her away to a shaman who's supposed to train her and keep her from becoming dangerous. But this shaman takes advantage of her, and she has to figure that out, how to get away from him, and how to, and then she has this premonition. She has clairvoyant powers, so she has this premonition. She has to decide what to do with that. So she's a little bit of a hero character. So it turned out really good. So yeah, he did like this illustration for the cover, and then I can show you one. So like this one when her parents leave her with the shaman.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, we did a lot of research to set it in like the Aztec Empire. So it was fun. Yeah.
That is so cool. Yeah, I know. You had me on Aztec Empire and history.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm like, that sounds awesome.
That would be the history buff. I could send you the links to all those websites.
That is so cool.
Interestingly enough, there's this United Kingdom website all about the Mayans and the Aztecs, like such detailed historical like artifacts and just experts chiming in all over the place with
that's neat
information about their culture. So it was very cool. So I can point you there if you need to go.
Yeah, no, I'm always open to all of that, because you should see how giddy I get when my National Geographic magazine comes for the history, because I have the history subscription. So it's straight up just every single issue is all history related. And I just like, everyone gets excited when they get like some shows it's available for binging. And I'm like, my Nat Geo history magazine arrived. It's like Teen Beat when I was a little kid.
So I have a question. Have you found that your dystopian books have not been as popular since we've been sort of living in what we would have thought was a dystopian world? Have you found that at all? Or has anybody like mentioned that they can't do that right now?
Yeah, it's hard. As far as I can't really tell if less people are reading my stuff or not, because I went wide about a year ago instead of being in KU, Kindle Unlimited. So a lot of transition was happening for me during all of that. But I can tell you that I did, when I was running ads, there was a lot of people who were commenting like, why would you like, or it's like, no, this is, not for me right now, or, oh, this sounds great. But there were some people who said, this is a little too real. But there was even some people that, not a lot, and I didn't take offense because people don't know, but like there were even some people like, why would you write this and like capitalize on what's going on right now? And I'm like, this story has been out for like 4 years. So,
Yeah.
it just is what it is. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely had like things have been said, or I have had some people say, mostly though, what I've heard people say is that they've taken breaks from reading or from social media in general, just because I think I don't know, for me, I feel like I've been reading more, but I think it just depends on what you read too. It's like I don't actually read. I like historical fantasy, but I actually don't read a lot of dystopian or post-apocalyptic stuff. I really want to I really like the stuff that has the history in it and the adventure aspect, So yeah, I don't know. That's a good question though, because I have wondered. I don't know how it's been for other authors either, but yeah. How
Yeah, I
about
do
you?
have a dystopian series that I have not continued that I need to get back to. It was eerily predictive because I released the first book in 2019, and it was about a worldwide pandemic, and they had even blamed it on the Chinese. So the next year,
Yeah.
when 2020 happened and the next book was supposed to come out, I just let it come out because I was like, what am I going to do? Sit on this for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's really not, they're not in that flu world. Their parents send them away to a camp so that they don't get sick. But turns out that her sister gets sick, and that's sort of the first plot line, that she has to figure out how to help her sister. But even me, I don't want to go back. I don't, I'm like, I'm not going
Yeah.
there. We're just putting that on the shelf for now. We're going to figure out how to fix that, like maybe in a couple of years from now.
Yeah, I've had readers ask me if it's weird to have written a story, because I mean, I did research for pandemic stuff too when I was writing it, and so like a lot of it is a lot of things that we've probably, a lot of us have experience with, like hospital situations or everyone wearing masks or whatever it is. So I have had some readers ask me, is it strange for me to have written something that was so eerily, kind of like what you were saying, very eerily possible and predictive. And it is, but I first thing I think of when they say that is, now I'm learning some of the things I would have written differently having been through it, right? Like I
Right.
would have had them wear masks way differently or way longer or whatever, like there's just all these things that I would have changed or tweaked a little bit having been in it, but there would have been a shortage of toilet paper. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of felt that way too, but because my characters weren't like living with the virus, and
Mm-hmm.
the country that they're in very quickly comes up with a cure and a vaccine, and so they're pretty much in the clear, and the plot line is more about like that country doesn't want to share the vaccine with the rest of the world.
Scarcity, yeah.
Yeah, scarcity.
Yeah, interesting. I've had a few readers also message me saying, "Oh, well, I have COVID. Do you think I'll get an ability?" Because that's what we call them in my series when they start changing. Like, I hope I get a good one. At least make it worth it. And I was laughing.
Well, if you have a virus that causes abilities, that's more outside the realm of what could actually happen, probably, than
Yeah.
puts it more into the unrealistic realm and gets you out of what's really going on in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, so I think that's the only series though that honestly, the Savage North Chronicles, and well, anything really in that we've written so far in the ending world, but I think that's really all that I've written that's like hardcore, could be post-apocalyptic. everything else is kind of more dystopian after that, because I try and set it in an era that's not like now, so that's where that whole alternative history question mark comes in, and historical fantasy. So
Fun.
yeah.
I just had a question on the top of my head, and now it went, oh yeah. So you told me about I guess the ending series, did you call it the ending series, where you did like multiple points of view, and there was it first person? I'm guessing first person point of view. And do you write first person for all your books, or do you change that up?
I do. So I do. I always have written third person. It's funny. I mean, first person. It's funny because I read, first and third person. I don't really have a preference, but I only write first person. However, I do, depending on what feels right, I will switch between like present and past. So like the ending series or Savage North Chronicles, that is first person past tense. And then the stories that I'm working on now for my Forgotten Lands world, those are all first person present tense. So yeah, I think I just tend to write based on what the urgency feels like. I don't know how somebody asked me that the other day, and I didn't know how to answer it either. Like, I don't know how I choose it. It just whatever feels right, and I don't know how I determine that. But just is what it is.
Yeah, a lot of fantasy writers do write in that third person, but I write in first person as well. So,
yeah, I have noticed that actually. Now that you say that, for sure. I'm actually reading a book right now. I don't know. Have you read any Adrienne Young books? She did like Sky in the Deep, and she does a bunch of things, but she has 2 Viking books that I've read. I'm reading the second one right now, and she does this interesting thing in the one I'm reading now called I think it's called The Girl the Sea Gave Back. But anyway, it's also has like a lot of Norse mythology in there. But she does something interesting, which I actually am finding a little confusing, but I have seen other authors do this before, where she has 2 POVs and she writes the male and the female, and they are in first person, but within their chapters, their voice transitions to third person whenever they're reflecting on memories. So, and then it goes back to first person when they're not. So it's really interesting. I probably wouldn't write a book that way, but it's something that I feel like I've seen a couple other authors do. And so I that's too much for my brain to try and process trying to write that, but it's just really interesting. Yeah. How I think it just must've felt right for her,
Reflect. So they're thinking about something that happened in the past to themselves, right? Or is it to some other people?
No, it's like to the reader. Yeah, it's funny because the first book in the series isn't like that. That's why it's so jarring. But yeah, so it's like they'll be sitting there and I think her name's Tor or whatever. She'll be talking about how, I watch the hawk in the sky, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm trying to think if there's a transition at all or just a pause, but then it'll go into, 3 years ago, she was sitting by the pond and she was thinking about, you know what I mean? It's so strange, so strange. But again, that goes back to, I guess, whatever feels right when you're writing a story. That must have felt right to her. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up. I have heard her name before, but I haven't read her books yet. So
yeah, she's a beautiful writer. But yeah, I'm listening to it right now on the audiobook. So that's why it was fresh in my mind, this whole perspective thing. I was sitting there thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's really hurting my brain trying to keep up with that.
Yeah, I was trying to challenge myself, and I just wrote a short story in an anthology that was third person. So I thought, well, I'll just challenge myself with a short story and it won't feel so. And I don't know why I even think I need to do it, which really makes no sense because I don't know why I thought I needed to do it. But then after doing it for my short story, I'm like, oh, I'm still good where I am. So.
Yeah, it's really messing with my head because I was telling you before that I have a few deadlines at once. And so I'm revising a couple manuscripts and writing a whole new one. And the one I'm working with Lindsey on is first person past tense. Everything else I'm working on is present tense. So trying to remember that as it's really screwing with my head. I don't know why I did this to myself. But yeah. Oh gosh. I don't know.
Yeah, I have trouble when I started a new series and I was doing first person present versus first person past. I was continually messing.
It's like you have
up.
to retrain your brain.
I think, yes. And your editor's like, whoa, what just happened here?
Yeah. I keep trying to catch myself, and then Lindsey, the other Lindsey, she'll be like, yeah, I kind of stopped pointing them out. I'm sorry. I'll catch it when I do a read through.
Yeah. Well, tell us what you're working on now then. What you have coming up?
So I have so what I've been working on with Lindsey for in the ending series world is a little more historical fantasy, because this takes place in the world we created but 300 years in the future. So it's like now that people have abilities, and it's kind of like in the fantasy world, it would be like compared to having your own magic system or something, even though it was genetically enhanced that way. But anyways, it takes place 300 years in the future, back when you're back to essentially like kingdoms. And because you don't have to rely on technology and all these things, everyone has abilities. It's more of a rural situation than like big cities that like have cars and that sort of thing. So but it's very much, it feels very historical fantasy with like castles and the clothing and stuff like that. But anyways, that's called the Raven Queen. It's the first book in the 3-book series, and it takes place like I said, 300 years after the series we already wrote. So it's been fun to see where that world would be now that we because we wrote it 10 years ago. So like, oh, we can start playing with what happens in 300 years to all these people who who survives and how do they change and that sort of thing. So we started out obviously with a whole new group of characters, and we've been able to explore that, which is really fun. And then I'm also working on, in my Forgotten Land series, or my Forgotten Worlds, it's confusing, sorry. I'm writing a series called The Ruined Lands, and it takes place in my Forgotten Lands world. So it's very much alternative history and historical fantasy. And I was saying that I was writing Vikings and pirates, which I am. So Sea of Storms comes out in November, and it is it's essentially a Norse fairy tale of sorts. It's a retelling. So it's a lot of Norse mythology, and there's a shipwreck, and there's a horrible sea captain who the stowaway falls in love with. And anyways, it's lots of adventure. It's really fun. And then the other one that I'm writing is Land of Fury, which is in the same world, and it's also connected to the story. And it takes place in what I call Norse land, which is this frozen winter land that Viking. It's essentially like in Norway, but in this alternative history. And so there's a horrible queen, and the princess is trying to get away, and she hears about this ship that can take her to a free country, so overseas. And so the huntsman comes after her and his 7 horsemen. So it's very much like a retelling of Snow White and the Huntsman. So
fun.
It's all super fun. And like I said, I'm able, because I'm putting it in these sort of realistic places that have existed, I've been able to get a little like actual culture in there and stuff, which is fun. So yeah, I'm all over the place, like I said. So that's
everything sounds super fun, and I already have you on my reading list, so I'm gonna get
awesome
one day.
Yeah, thanks. That is fun.
Well, tell everyone where you can find you, your website, your social media.
Yeah, so lindseypogue.com, and you can get everything on there pretty much. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm author Lindsey Pogue pretty much everywhere. So again, all the links and everything are on my website. I have my own direct store, which there's some you can get some things cheaper there. I'll get all that on my website too. And yeah, that's kind of me. I do have a podcast that I should have you on one of these times. We just talk about it's called No Shelf Controlled Books, Booze and Banter. And me and Lindsey, we get together and we talk about book to film adaptations and have a cocktail or whatever, and just like, or read a book that's going crazy on Book Talk, and then really say if it's worth the hype and stuff. Anyway, it's fun. So
Oh, that sounds like
You
a
guys
lot of
can,
fun. I would love that because me and book to film are right there. So
yeah. So anyways, so I do that too sometimes. So anyway, that's me.
Well, thank you for being here. I so
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me. This is really fun. I'm
was
usually the
fun.
one doing on the other side, so it's nice to come and talk to somebody else.
And if I ever need history stuff, I'm coming to you.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.